The stars of the Valorian system shimmered like silver dust across the endless black sky. The United Human Expeditionary Fleet had just entered orbit, their ships forming a quiet formation above the glowing planet of Valerian Prime, home to one of the oldest and most mysterious alien empires in the galaxy. For centuries, the Valorians had watched humanity from a distance, never speaking, never trading, and never interfering. Their technology was ancient yet far beyond human understanding. They were known for their calm wisdom, their long lives, and their strict sense of order. Most species in the galaxy respected them or feared them, but now, for the first time in history, the Valorians had sent an invitation. Not to Earth, not to the United Human Council, but to one single man. His name was Captain Adrian Holt. Adrian stood on the bridge of his ship, UHS Resolute, staring at the glowing blue planet on the screen. His crew worked silently, waiting for his command. He was tall, calm, and carried a quiet strength that made people trust him easily. He didn't know why the Valorian Queen had summoned him. He wasn't a politician or a scientist, just a fleet officer who had spent most of his career exploring deep space and keeping peace between colonies. "Are you sure the message was meant for me?" he asked again, turning to his communications officer, Lieutenant Kara Lynn. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady but curious. "The Queen herself mentioned your full name." The message was sent directly through their royal channel. No one else was invited. Adrian sighed softly. "A queen of 1,000 worlds calls for one human soldier." That sounds like the start of a strange story. The crew exchanged quiet smiles. They all felt the same mix of excitement and unease. No one in the fleet had ever seen a Valorian in person. The species was known to be distant and proud, their queen even more so, Queen Serathis of Valerian, ruler of light and logic, the silver monarch of her people. The journey to the planet was calm but filled with tension. A single Valorian escort ship approached, glowing like liquid crystal, and guided the Resolute through the atmosphere. The human crew stared in awe as they passed over floating cities that shimmered like glass under golden sunlight. Rivers of light flowed between tall silver towers. The air itself sparkled faintly, filled with energy. Adrian had seen many worlds, but never one like this. When his shuttle landed at the royal platform, Valorian guards stood waiting. They were tall, elegant beings with pale skin that reflected light like pearls. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their armor seemed grown rather than made. A Valorian attendant bowed. "Captain Adrian Holt of Humanity. The Queen awaits you." Adrian nodded. "Lead the way." The palace was a marvel of living architecture, walls made of luminous stone that shifted colors like the ocean, floors that hummed softly as if alive. He walked through long halls filled with light and quiet music, unsure if it came from instruments or the walls themselves. Finally, he entered the throne hall. It was vast, larger than any cathedral he had ever seen. The ceiling opened to the stars, showing the twin moons of Valerian glowing high above. At the far end, upon a throne carved from translucent crystal, sat Queen Serathis. She was unlike any being Adrian had ever seen. Her tall frame radiated calm grace, her silver hair flowing like moonlight down her shoulders. Her eyes, bright and deep, seemed to hold galaxies within them. She wore a gown made of woven light, its colors shifting with every movement. The air itself seemed to still as Adrian approached. He bowed politely. "Your Majesty, I am honored by your summons." The Queen's voice was soft but powerful, echoing like music across the chamber. "Rise, Captain Holt, I thank you for answering so swiftly." He stood, meeting her gaze. It was strange, he didn't feel fear. Instead, he felt curiosity, and a strange warmth he couldn't explain. "I am only a soldier," he said humbly. "May I ask why I was summoned?" A faint smile curved her lips. "You will know soon, human. Tell me, what drives your kind to cross the stars so fearlessly?" Her question caught him off guard. "I suppose it's in our nature," Adrian replied after a moment. "We want to see what's beyond. To learn, to grow, to connect." The Queen's eyes glimmered. "To connect," she repeated quietly. A rare answer. Most speak of power or expansion. You speak of connection. Her words floated through the air like a melody. Around them, Valorian advisors watched silently, their faces unreadable. To them, humans were a young and unpredictable race, strong, emotional, and reckless. But Queen Serathis looked at Adrian with something else in her gaze. Fascination. The conversation continued. She asked him about human art, music, and dreams. Not about politics or trade, but about feelings, hope, sadness, courage. Adrian spoke simply, telling her about Earth, about how humans build beauty even in hardship, and how they stand together when times are dark. The Queen listened closely, her expression thoughtful. "Your species burns brightly," she murmured once. "So brief, yet so full of fire." Adrian smiled faintly. "That's because our time is short, Your Majesty. Every moment matters." Her silver eyes softened. "A lesson my people forgot long ago." There was silence between them, deep and peaceful. It was as if two worlds were trying to understand each other, not through science or politics, but through something more human. Outside the palace, whispers began spreading among the Valorian court. The Queen had never granted such personal attention to any visitor, let alone a human. Some nobles felt uneasy, others jealous. "Why is she wasting time on a lesser species?" one counselor muttered. "She studies him," another replied quietly. "Or perhaps she sees something we cannot." But the Queen cared little for the murmurs. For the first time in many years, she felt curious, not as a ruler, but as a being trying to rediscover wonder. That night, she watched the stars from her balcony, remembering Adrian's words about human hope. She wondered how such short-lived creatures could carry so much strength. She wanted to understand that light within them, the fire that never seemed to fade. The next day, Adrian was invited to tour the royal gardens. They floated above the palace like islands in the sky, filled with glowing flowers and creatures that shimmered in soft colors. He walked beside the Queen, feeling both honored and uncertain. "Your world is beautiful," he said honestly. "It feels alive." "It is," she replied. "We shaped it long ago, guided by harmony. Yet sometimes, in all our perfection, we lost our heart." Adrian looked at her. "Maybe that's why you called me here." She smiled gently. "Perhaps." They stopped beside a pond where golden fish swam in circles of light. The reflection of the stars danced across the water. "Tell me, Captain," she said suddenly, "what do humans fear most?" He thought for a long moment. "To be forgotten," he said finally. "We live short lives, but we want to leave something behind, something that proves we existed." Her expression changed slightly, almost tender. "Then your kind and mine share more than I thought. Even immortals fear being forgotten." Their eyes met again, and for the first time Adrian saw not a queen, but a lonely soul who had ruled for ages yet felt something missing. When the meeting ended, Adrian returned to his ship. His crew was waiting anxiously for his report. "What happened, sir?" Kira asked. "Did she threaten us? Did she ask for technology?" Adrian smiled faintly. "No, she asked about us." "About who we are." The crew exchanged puzzled looks. "About us?" "Yes," Adrian said softly, staring out the viewport toward the glowing planet below. "I think she's trying to understand humanity. And I think she truly means it." He didn't tell them everything, not the strange feeling he had when she looked into his eyes or the quiet spark that seemed to pass between them. He wasn't sure what it meant yet. All he knew was that something was beginning, something that could change everything between their worlds. As his ship drifted in orbit, Adrian couldn't shake the Queen's last words before he left the palace. "You fascinate me, human," she had said softly. "Your spirit shines brighter than your stars. I wish to see how far that light can go." Adrian didn't know it then, but her words were only the beginning. Soon the Queen's next question would echo across the galaxy, and it would shock everyone. The following days on Valerian Prime passed in a soft rhythm. Captain Adrian Holt was invited to remain within the royal palace as an honored guest. Though he had been in hundreds of diplomatic meetings in his life, nothing compared to the calm wonder of this place. The Valorian palace didn't feel like a structure made by hands, it felt alive, like a part of the planet itself. Every wall shone gently, every hallway breathed faint light, and every sound echoed like music. The air smelled faintly of crystal rain and flowers that glowed in twilight. But it wasn't the palace that amazed Adrian the most. It was the Queen herself. Each morning, Queen Sarathis summoned him to her solar chamber, a high crystal room that looked out over the glowing cities below. She always stood by the great window, her silver eyes calm, her posture flawless. Yet beneath that calmness, Adrian sensed something human, a spark of curiosity, a hint of loneliness. She asked him endless questions. Not about war, not about trade, not even about Earth's politics. She asked about people. How do humans find joy when their worlds are torn by storms? Why do humans create art when they are in pain? Why does your kind continue to explore when danger waits in every shadow of space? Adrian answered as honestly as he could. Because we don't want fear to win, he said. Because we're small, but we dream big. Because hope gives us strength to keep walking forward. The Queen would listen in silence, her eyes filled with quiet light. Sometimes when he spoke, she smiled faintly, as if remembering something long forgotten. As their conversations grew longer, rumors spread through the Valorian court. The nobles and advisors watched quietly, but their unease grew each day. Humans were new to the galactic community, emotional, unpredictable, and short-lived. The idea that their great queen was spending hours alone with one of them made many uncomfortable. In the great halls, whispers began. Why does she give the humans so much time? One noble asked bitterly. She studies him, another said. Maybe she finds their species entertaining. Or maybe, a third whispered, she finds him interesting. The word interesting spread quickly, and the meaning twisted as it passed from one mouth to another. Soon, it wasn't just the court talking, the entire palace buzzed with speculation. Adrian, unaware of the gossip, continued to meet with the Queen. He had begun to enjoy their talks. She was different from any ruler he had met. Wise but gentle, powerful yet kind. Once he told her about Earth's sunsets, about the orange skies and waves of the ocean glowing under the fading sun. The Queen listened as if he were describing a dream. Your world sounds full of color, she said softly. On Valerian, our skies are silver. Beautiful but cold. Perhaps warmth is something your kind carries with them. Adrian smiled slightly. Maybe that's why we're called humans. She looked at him, curious. What does that word mean to you? He thought for a moment. It means to feel, to try to care, even when it hurts. For a long while, the Queen didn't speak. She turned to look at the horizon where twin moons rose together, their light silver and pure. Then humanity, she said quietly, is rarer than we believed. That evening, the Queen announced a royal gathering, a feast to honor the new alliance between Valorians and humans. It was to be held in the Hall of Starlight, a place known for its beauty and history. The chamber stretched wide with thousands of floating lights shimmering above. The walls were made of living crystal, and the ceiling reflected the galaxy itself. Every noble, scientist, and commander of the Valorian Empire attended. Dozens of humans from the fleet were also invited, all dressed in formal uniforms. For the first time, two civilizations shared one table in harmony. Adrian stood among them, trying to blend in. But his name was whispered. Everywhere, that's him, the human who speaks with the Queen every morning. They say she trusts him more than her own counsel. Do you think it's true that she's fascinated by him? He heard the murmurs but tried to ignore them. He was just doing his duty, representing Earth with dignity. When the Queen entered, all sound ceased. The crowd bowed deeply as she glided to her throne at the head of the table. Her gown shimmered like the surface of a calm ocean, her crown reflecting a soft blue glow. She looked around the hall, her gaze calm and commanding. Then her eyes found Adrian and she smiled slightly. Captain Holt, she said, please sit near me tonight. I wish to speak with you during the feast. The room filled with stunned silence. Even the Valorian nobles exchanged shocked glances. Never in memory had the Queen invited an alien to sit beside her throne. The feast began. Plates of shining fruit and crystal wine were served. Strange instruments played soft melodies that filled the air like floating light. Adrian felt uneasy but honored. He answered the Queen's gentle questions, describing Earth's music, humor, and history. The Queen seemed deeply engaged, sometimes even laughing softly, a sound so beautiful it made nearby guests pause. At one point, she leaned slightly closer. Your species has achieved much in so little time, she said. You have learned faster than most, and you adapt to everything. It fascinates me. Adrian smiled humbly. We learn because we must. Our lives are short, so we try to make them meaningful. She tilted her head. And what gives life meaning for you, Captain? He hesitated. People, he said finally. The ones we protect. The ones we care about. That's what makes every danger worth it. The Queen looked thoughtful. Her eyes softened again, but this time there was something different in them. something more personal. Suddenly, one of the Valorian counselors stood. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "it pleases us to see your wisdom in understanding these new allies. But perhaps such attention to one single human is unnecessary." The hall grew still. The counselor's tone was polite, but everyone could hear the concern behind his words. The Queen did not frown or raise her voice. She simply looked at him calmly. "Do you believe I waste my time, Counselor?" The alien bowed quickly. "Of course not, Your Majesty. I only mean to protect your image." Her lips curved faintly. "Then let us show them an image they will remember." She turned toward Adrian, her silver eyes bright under the starlight. Her next words would echo through the entire hall and across the galaxy. "You fascinate me, human," she said softly, every word clear as crystal. Then, after a pause that seemed to stretch forever, she added with a small, curious smile, "Are you taken?" For a heartbeat, no one moved. The music stopped. The lights above flickered faintly. Even the air seemed frozen. Adrian stared at her, speechless. His mind blanked completely. The nobles gasped softly, their faces filled with disbelief. Some hid their shock behind polite expressions, others whispered in alarm. Could that possibly be a personal question? From a queen? The humans at the table looked equally stunned. Commander Reyes, sitting 2 seats away, nearly dropped his glass. Adrian felt the heat rise to his face. Your Majesty, I beg your pardon?" The Queen's expression didn't change. Her tone remained calm and sincere. "I asked if you were taken. It is a question of curiosity, nothing more." Her advisors exchanged worried glances. The phrase was simple in human language, but among Valorians it carried deeper meaning. It was a question rarely asked, a question that meant personal interest beyond formal respect. Adrian tried to answer carefully. "No, Your Majesty. I'm not taken." "Interesting," she said softly, almost to herself. Then she smiled again, a smile that somehow felt both royal and human. "Perhaps that explains your free spirit." The hall erupted in whispers. The humans looked at one another in confusion. The Valorians looked like their entire world had shifted. For the rest of the evening, no one could focus on the feast. The Queen continued speaking calmly as if nothing unusual had happened. Adrian tried to keep his composure, answering her questions politely, but his mind was spinning. He couldn't tell if her question was a test, a cultural misunderstanding, or something else entirely. But the tone in her voice, gentle, curious, almost playful, stayed with him. When the feast ended, she stood gracefully and addressed the hall. "Tonight, we have learned more about our new friends than in 100 years of silence. Let this be a beginning, not an end." The guests applauded politely, but everyone's thoughts were the same. What did the Queen mean by that question? Later that night, as Adrian returned to his quarters, he looked out the window at the glowing city below. The Queen's words echoed again and again in his mind. "You fascinate me, human. Are you taken?" He didn't know what she truly meant, but deep down he felt something shift within him. A bridge had been formed, not of treaties or politics, but of understanding, and perhaps, just perhaps, something more. The Queen's questions spread faster than light. By morning, the entire palace was filled with whispers. By noon, every corner of the Valorian Empire knew about it, and by night, even human colonies across the stars were talking about the same thing. The Queen of Valerian had publicly asked a human captain if he was taken. No one knew exactly what it meant. To some, it was a joke. To others, it was a sign of diplomacy, or something far more personal. But to the Queen herself, it was something different, something that even she couldn't fully explain. In the royal chamber, Queen Sarathis stood before the great window that overlooked her city. Twin moons reflected across the shining towers, and the air shimmered with faint light. Yet the Queen's thoughts were far away, wandering through questions that no advisor could answer. "Why does this human spirit stir something in me?" she murmured softly. Her advisor, Counselor Vera, entered quietly. "Your Majesty, the council grows uneasy. They say your actions are unconventional." Sarathis turned her silver eyes toward her trusted counselor. "Unconventional, yes. But tell me, Vera, have we not lived in silence for too long? Have we not forgotten what it means to feel curious again?" The counselor bowed his head. "Perhaps, my queen. But the nobles fear your interest in this human may be seen as weakness. Then they have forgotten what strength truly means." she replied. Her voice was calm, but there was a trace of emotion within it, a feeling rare for a Valorian monarch. Meanwhile, aboard the human ship UHS Resolute, Captain Adrian Holt found himself trapped in a storm of attention. Every message from Earth Command, every report from other fleets mentioned the same event. Captain Holt, what exactly did the Queen mean? Is this a romantic gesture or a political statement? Are you aware that her words have changed how every race views humanity? Adrian didn't have answers. He was a soldier, not a diplomat. He hadn't expected his conversation to turn into a galactic headline. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. All I did was answer a question, he muttered to himself. His communications officer, Lieutenant Kara Lynn, smiled slightly. A question from the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, sir. You might be the first human in history to make a queen blush. Adrian laughed softly. I don't think she blushed. I think she meant something deeper, but I'm not sure what. The next day he received another summons from the palace. Despite the rumors and warnings from Earth Command, he accepted. Something inside him told him to go. When he entered the Queen's private garden, she was already waiting. The glowing trees bent gently toward her as if greeting their ruler. Captain Holt, she said in her calm voice, I fear my words have caused confusion among your people. Adrian smiled faintly. Among yours too, I think. Her lips curved in amusement. Indeed. My council believes I was unwise. But tell me honestly, did I offend you? Not at all, Adrian replied. You only surprised me. And yet, she said softly, you returned. He met her gaze, curious. Was I not supposed to? The Queen looked up at the stars. Most would run from what they don't understand. You walked toward it. That is what makes your kind fascinating. They walked together through the shining garden paths. Strange flowers glowed in the dark, and soft lights floated above the ponds like living stars. The Queen asked again about humanity, not its ships or cities, but its soul. Why do your people risk their lives to save others? Why do they forgive even after betrayal? Why do they find beauty in things that end? Adrian thought carefully before answering. Because that's what makes life special. We don't live forever, so we hold on to every small thing that matters. Friendship, love, courage, even mistakes. Serathis looked at him with quiet awe. You live with such passion in such brief lives. My people have lived for thousands of years, yet we lost that spark long ago. She stopped near a tree whose silver leaves shimmered like starlight. Maybe, she whispered. Your kind is what the universe created to remind us what it means to feel alive. Adrian said nothing. He simply stood beside her, feeling the strange peace that always surrounded her presence. But outside those gardens, unrest was growing. In the Valorian council chamber, voices rose. This cannot continue, said one general sharply. The Queen risks the stability of our empire for a creature that will die in a century. Councillor Vera tried to calm them. She seeks understanding, not attachment. Understanding. Another shouted. She called him fascinating. She asked if he was taken in public. The other species mock us already. The debate grew heated, filled with fear and pride. Some feared losing respect. Others feared change. Finally, the generals decided something drastic. If the Queen would not end this connection, they would force her to. A week later, when Adrian was preparing for a return trip to his ship, Valorian guards approached him. Captain Holt, said their commander, you are to remain aboard your vessel until further notice. The council is reviewing your visits, Adrian frowned. Reviewing? Why? No one knows, the guard replied. But it is best you stay away from the palace. Adrian agreed, though uneasily. Something felt wrong. Back aboard the Resolute, Kara looked worried. Sir, Command just sent an encrypted message. They want you to leave the system immediately. They think your safety's at risk. Adrian stared out the viewport at the glowing planet below. If I leave now, it will look like fear, he said quietly. And fear isn't how humans build peace. That night, deep inside the palace, Queen Serathis faced her council. You would forbid me from seeing him? She asked, her tone calm but cold. For the good of our people, one general said. Your Majesty, your behavior endangers the dignity of the throne. Dignity? She repeated softly. Do you call ignorance dignity? Do you call fear wisdom? The humans will use your fascination to their advantage. Another shouted. The queen rose from her throne and the light in the room dimmed. Her voice, though quiet, carried the strength of centuries. Then perhaps, she said, it is time for someone to remind you that curiosity is not weakness. It is strength. The moment we stop learning, we stop living. Her words silenced them. Yet she knew the battle was not over. The following day, Adrian received a secret message from an unknown source. It was written in Valorian script but signed with a simple emblem, the Queen's seal. Meet me at the Crystal Bridge at dawn. He went without hesitation. The bridge floated over the capital's central lake, its surface glowing softly beneath the early light. When she appeared, the morning mist swirled around her like silver clouds. Your Majesty, he said, bowing slightly. Why call me here in secret? Because my council watches every step I take, she replied softly. And because there are things I must say that cannot be spoken in the throne room. She looked at him with the same calm warmth that had first caught his attention. You may think my question at the feast was careless, but it was not. Among my kind, that question means more than curiosity. It means I wish to understand another being fully, without barriers. Adrian listened quietly. I wanted to know, she continued, if your heart was already bound to someone, or if there was still room in it for understanding beyond your own species. Adrian smiled faintly. You didn't offend me, Your Majesty. You made me think. Maybe that's what understanding really is, not comfort but curiosity. The Queen's lips curved gently. Then perhaps we both have much to learn. Their moment of quiet was broken by the distant roar of engines. From the sky, Valorian security ships descended. The council had discovered their meeting. Go, she whispered. If they find you here, they will accuse you of manipulation. I won't run, Adrian said firmly. If they question me, I'll answer them, truthfully. The Queen looked at him, her silver eyes glowing softly. Then you are braver than most who have ever stood before me. He smiled. Maybe that's just being human. As soldiers landed around them, he raised his hands calmly. The Queen stepped forward and spoke sharply to the commander. Do not harm him, she ordered. He is under my protection. The soldiers hesitated, then obeyed. In that moment, something in the air changed. The Queen had publicly defied her council to protect a human, and everyone watching knew it. That night, across both human and Valorian networks, new headlines appeared. Queen Sarathis protects human captain. Unrest in the Valorian Council over human relations. Human courage or alien favoritism. The galaxy was watching, waiting for what would happen next. Adrian sat alone in his quarters, looking out at the stars. Despite everything, the tension, the fear, the politics, he couldn't stop thinking about the Queen's words on the bridge. You may think my question was careless. He smiled faintly. No, he whispered to himself. It was the most honest question anyone's ever asked. He didn't know it yet, but the next time he stood before the Queen, it wouldn't be as a guest. It would be as someone fighting for truth in front of an empire. The Valorian palace was silent that morning. The great halls, usually filled with calm music and light, felt heavy and tense. Queen Sarathis stood by her crystal window looking down at the shining city below. The air shimmered with energy as ships flew across the sky, carrying diplomats, soldiers, and witnesses. Today was not an ordinary day. Today the Queen would face her own people. Adrian Holt walked beside her, his uniform crisp, his face calm, though his heart pounded hard. He had never seen such quiet fear in the palace before. The Valorians were proud and logical, but this time, emotion filled the air. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen between the Queen and the human who had changed everything. Are you ready for this? Adrian asked softly. Sarathis turned to him with a faint smile. Readiness is a human concept, Captain. My kind prefer certainty, and today nothing feels certain. He gave a small laugh. Then maybe that makes you a little human today. Her silver eyes softened. Perhaps it does. The trial was held in the Hall of Unity, a vast circular chamber with walls that glowed with soft blue light. Hundreds of Valorian council members sat in rows above the central floor, where a single clear platform floated. The Queen stood there, tall and graceful, her royal crown gleaming. Adrian stood beside her, though many whispered that a human had no right to stand in such a sacred place. When the High Counselor, an old Valorian named Vareth, struck his staff, the hall fell silent. Queen Sarathis of the Valorian Empire, Vareth said, his voice echoing, You stand before this council accused of breaking ancient law. You allowed a non-Valorian to influence royal judgment in personal affairs. Many fear this has weakened our rule. Murmurs rose through the chamber. Some nodded, others looked uneasy. Sarathis lifted her chin. I have broken no law. I have sought understanding. Our alliance with humanity is young. To learn from them is to strengthen our empire, not weaken it. Vareth's cold eyes turned to Adrian. And you, human, Captain Holt. Do you deny that you have captured the Queen's attention and, by doing so, endangered peace? Adrian stood straight. I didn't capture anything, sir. I only spoke the truth when asked. If honesty is dangerous, then I am guilty of that. Whispers spread again. A few younger Valorians smiled faintly, admiring his courage. As the trial continued, witnesses spoke, Valorian nobles, generals, and scholars. Some accused Adrian of using charm to gain influence. Others defended him, saying he brought a rare sense of warmth and bravery. One general, tall and fierce, stepped forward. His name was General Kravos, a war hero respected across the Empire. This human, Kravos said, his voice sharp, is clever. His species is clever, but cleverness hides ambition. Today it's curiosity. Tomorrow it could be control. I say remove him before our queen forgets what she is. Gasps filled the room. Adrian met his gaze calmly. General, with all respect, humans don't come to control anyone. We came to share knowledge. We came because your queen believed there's something to learn from us. If you fear understanding, then maybe the weakness isn't mine. Kravos stepped closer, his voice low. You speak boldly for a short-lived species. Adrian smiled slightly. Maybe that's why we speak boldly. We don't have centuries to waste being afraid. The hall grew quiet. Even Vareth raised an eyebrow. The queen's lips curved into the faintest smile. After the witnesses finished, it was the queen's turn to speak. Her voice echoed like gentle thunder. My people, she began. You call me weak for speaking with a human. You think my interest in him is emotional or foolish. But tell me, have we not spent millennia studying stars, technology, and laws? Have we not become cold from our own perfection? Humans are not our enemies. They are our reflection, showing us what we have forgotten. Courage, heart, and the will to live with passion. Her voice grew stronger. Captain Holt has reminded me that greatness does not come only from long life or power. It comes from the strength to care, to protect, and to hope even when the end is near. That is what makes humanity strong, the council whispered among themselves. Some looked inspired, others doubtful. But before the discussion could continue, General Kravos raised his arm. Words of passion, he said, but not of reason. Emotions can blind even a queen. If the queen is not fit to rule without human influence, then she must step down. The crowd gasped again. Guards moved instantly, but Sarathis lifted her hand. Let him speak. Let all of them speak. I have nothing to hide. Adrian stepped forward. No, enough. All eyes turned to him. If anyone is to be judged, he said, then let it be me. I'll stand trial alone. The queen only showed me kindness. If that's a crime, then I'll take the punishment. The queen turned sharply. Adrian, no, but he shook his head. Your people deserve to see truth, not fear. The council agreed to his request. A separate hearing began for Adrian alone. He was asked countless questions about human nature, his intentions, his loyalty. Vareth leaned forward. Tell me, Captain Holt, why does your species value emotion so much? Does it not make you reckless? Adrian took a breath. Maybe it does. But it also makes us brave. It helps us fight when we should run, build when we should rest, and care when it's easier to ignore. We make mistakes, yes, but we grow stronger because of them. Vareth stared at him silently. And what do you want from the queen? Adrian looked toward Sarathis, who sat behind a glass barrier, her expression unreadable. Nothing, he said softly. She's not a prize to want. She's a leader who believed humanity could bring hope. I just didn't want her to stand alone. A long silence followed. Then Vareth turned to the council. You have heard him. What say you all? The hall buzzed with quiet voices. Finally, one young council member stood. Perhaps the human is right. Perhaps we forgot what it means to feel. Others nodded. Even General Kravos looked uncertain. After long discussion, Vareth struck his staff again. The council finds no fault in Captain Holt. The Queen remains our ruler. This matter is closed. A wave of relief swept through the chamber. The Queen stood, her eyes bright. She looked at Adrian with deep gratitude. When the trial ended, the hall emptied slowly. The Queen and Adrian stood alone on the platform. "You risked everything," she said quietly. He smiled. "I didn't risk much. Just my pride," she shook her head. "You risked your life in a place that does not understand you." "Why?" Adrian looked at her for a moment. "Because you saw something in humanity worth believing in. I couldn't let that belief die because of fear." Sarathis stepped closer, her long robes flowing like silver mist. "You are a strange man, Adrian Holt. Among your people, do they all speak this way?" He chuckled. "Not really. Most would have tried to make a joke by now." Her laughter rang softly through the hall. "Then perhaps it is good that it was you." For the first time since the trial began, the tension in the air faded. The Queen turned toward the open balcony, where twin suns painted the city gold. "This is not the end," she said. "The council will calm, but others may still plot. Yet now they have seen your truth." "And truth is stronger than fear," Adrian nodded. "Then we'll face whatever comes next, together." She looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting the sunlight. "Together," she repeated softly. At that moment, the galaxy felt just a little smaller, and the distance between two worlds grew shorter. The next day, news of the trial spread across every planet. The story of a human who stood before an alien empire and spoke for truth became legendary. Across both species, people began to think differently. The Queen had shown courage, and the human had shown heart. And though the future still held many challenges, one thing was clear. Neither humanity nor the Valorians would ever be the same again. The twin suns of Valoria rose over the crystal towers, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. The great city shimmered as if it were alive. After the long, intense trial, peace had finally returned to the Valorian Empire. The people spoke softly of the human who had stood against fear, and of the Queen who had trusted him. But not everything was calm. Beneath the beauty of the shining city, quiet meetings took place. Some nobles still whispered against the Queen's decision to trust humanity. Others began to see hope in her choice. A new dawn was rising, but no one yet knew what it would bring. Captain Adrian Holt stood on the balcony of his guest quarters watching the sunrise. His mind was full of thoughts. He had come to this world as a diplomat, then almost became a criminal, and now he wasn't sure what he was anymore. Behind him, a soft sound made him turn. Queen Sarathis entered, wearing a simple robe instead of her usual royal attire. She looked different, calmer, lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. "You should rest," she said. "You've done more than enough for one lifetime." Adrian smiled faintly. "I don't think I'll ever get used to this place. Even the air feels alive." She stepped beside him, her eyes following the sun. "Valoria has always been alive. We are just slow to notice it." For a few moments they stood in silence, the wind brushing past them like music. Later that day, a message arrived from the Human Alliance fleet. They had been watching everything that happened on Valoria. The message was clear: return to base immediately for debriefing. Adrian knew what it meant. They wanted to question him, to make sure the Queen's interest hadn't changed his loyalty. He folded the message quietly and placed it in his pocket. "Your people call you back," Sarathis said, reading his expression. He nodded. "They're worried. They think I've gotten too close." "Have you?" she asked softly. Adrian hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe not close enough." Her silver eyes shone with quiet amusement. "Then perhaps it is good they worry." She walked slowly toward her throne, which now stood in the center of her private hall. A few trusted guards watched silently as she called for her advisors. When everyone was gathered, she spoke clearly, her voice calm but strong. "The time has come to decide what we are," she said. "For centuries we have stood apart from others, believing ourselves above emotion. But we have seen what humanity can bring. They are not perfect. They make mistakes. But they also bring warmth, courage, and life." Her advisors listened closely. Even those who once doubted her now looked thoughtful. "I will form a new alliance," Sarathis continued. "Not of conquest or control, but of unity. Valoria will stand with humanity as equal partners in peace and knowledge." The hall fell silent. Then slowly the youngest counselor began to clap. Soon the others followed. Even the guards bowed their heads in agreement. The Queen had spoken, and her words carried the weight of stars. The announcement spread across the galaxy. News networks from dozens of worlds broadcasted it. "Valoria and humanity form historic alliance." The headlines read, In every colony and station, people talked about the Queen's courage. Many admired her, some doubted her, but no one could deny that something new had begun. Meanwhile, Adrian prepared for his return. His ship was ready and human command waited, but as he stood on the departure platform, Sarathis came to see him off. The platform was quiet except for the hum of the engines. The light of the setting sun made everything glow with soft orange and silver. "You are really leaving," she said, her voice calm but gentle. "I have to," Adrian replied. "Duty calls. They'll want me to explain everything that happened here." "And what will you tell them?" "The truth," he said. "That Valoria has more heart than anyone ever gave it credit for." She smiled, faint but real. "And what of the Queen who asked a foolish question before her court?" Adrian chuckled. "That question might have changed the galaxy." Her eyes sparkled with quiet humor. "You never did answer it properly." He looked at her for a long moment. The air between them felt still, almost sacred. "Maybe I didn't know the answer then," he said softly. "But now, maybe I do." The Queen tilted her head. "And what is your answer, human?" Adrian smiled. "Not taken, Your Majesty, but maybe captivated." A soft laugh escaped her lips, light as wind through glass. "Then the fascination is mutual, Captain Holt." For a second, the world seemed to stop. Two very different beings from two very different worlds stood together at the edge of a new age. Weeks passed. Adrian returned to the Human Alliance headquarters, where he was greeted with applause, questions, and endless reports. Yet in every meeting, every speech, his mind drifted back to Valoria, to the Queen who had dared to ask a simple human question. The alliance between the two civilizations grew quickly. Trade routes opened, scientists shared technology, and cultural exchanges began. Humans visited Valoria to learn their ways, while Valorian scholars came to Earth to understand emotion and art. One evening, while Adrian was reviewing reports, a message came through his console. It carried the royal seal of Valoria. He opened it and smiled. It was a short message. Just a few words. "You fascinate me still, human." "S." He laughed softly to himself. Somehow, across the endless stars, her voice still carried warmth. Months later, Adrian returned to Valoria as part of the official Alliance celebration. The palace was brighter than ever, decorated with banners of both symbols, the shining Valorian star and the blue Earth emblem. The hall was full of delegates, musicians, and diplomats from every corner of known space. When Queen Sarathis entered, the entire hall rose. She walked with quiet grace, her silver robe flowing behind her like starlight. "Citizens of Valoria and guests of Earth," she began, her voice echoing through the grand chamber. "Today marks the beginning of something greater than power. Today we celebrate understanding." She turned to Adrian, who stood among the human delegation. "It began with a question and it continues with trust." He stepped forward, bowing slightly. "And may it never end, Your Majesty." A wave of applause filled the chamber. The moment was recorded and broadcasted across galaxies. Later, as the celebration ended and the guests departed, Adrian found himself once again standing on the same balcony where it all began. The stars glittered above like endless diamonds. He heard soft footsteps behind him. "You always find your way to this place," Sarathis said. He smiled without turning. "It's peaceful. Makes the galaxy feel smaller." She stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Do you think your people truly understand us now?" "Not yet," Adrian replied. "But they will. One step at a time," she nodded. "And do you understand us?" "I'm still learning," he said with a smile. "But I'm a good student." Her silver eyes met his. "Then my lessons will continue." They stood there for a long while, neither speaking, both knowing that something important had begun. Something beyond politics, beyond species, beyond time. When she finally spoke again, her voice was soft. "Tell me, human, are you taken now?" Adrian laughed quietly, the same gentle laugh that had once broken royal silence. "Completely," he said. "Taken by the stars, and maybe a little by a queen." Sarathis smiled, her expression glowing with a mix of humor and warmth. "Then perhaps this time the galaxy should be jealous." From that day onward, the legend of Queen Sarathis and Captain Adrian Holt became one of the most told stories in both human and Valorian history. It was not a tale of romance alone. It was a story of discovery, courage, and connection between two worlds. Children grew up hearing how one question changed everything. Artists painted their meeting, Poets wrote of the Queen's words, and diplomats used their story as a symbol of peace. In every version, the line that started it all remained the same. "You fascinate me, human. Are you taken?" And somewhere beyond the stars, perhaps the Queen still smiled every time she remembered the answer.